I want to bring in now Trey Gowdy, former House Oversight Committee chairman, former prosecutor, and Fox News contributor now. Trey, good to see you and talk with you, I should say, tonight. You know, that question of what comes next is so important because William Barr will make a decision now, not only about what the public will see, but what Congress will see. Talk to me about the process.
Well, I think it's important for your viewers, Harris, to realize the reason we have Bob Mueller is because the Department of Justice, who otherwise would be handling this, felt like they had a conflict. So Mueller, in essence, worked for the Department of Justice. That is who the report goes to. The only obligation to notify Congress is if he had a recommendation that his supervisor, Rod Rosenstein or Bill Barr, did not follow. So what's going to happen is Barr's going to read the report. I think he is going to want to share as much as he can because Barr understands what I've understood from day one. Mueller's number one job was to report on what Russia did. The second part of that is with whom, if anyone, did they do it. That's the Democrat focus. That is their obsession, but that was not Mueller's obsession. So I'm sure he will want to share with the intelligence communities this is the way to prepare for 2020 and beyond. And the Democrats can subpoena him. They can bring Mueller to Capitol Hill, but we have three separate branches of government. And congressional investigations, do you remember, Harris, when the House Intelligence Committee had to vote to turn over transcripts to the special counsel? They had to take a vote on that. Why didn't special counsel just go get them? Why did they have to ask another branch of government? Because we have three separate branches. This report belongs to the executive branch. Just like congressional investigations belong to the legislative branch, it's not just classified information, grand jury material, Privacy Act. It's also the fact that the FBI and the Department of Justice do not exonerate people. That is not their job.
Right,
their job is
it.
to indict people.
And
it's really not even to write a report or hold a press conference. What Comey did with Clinton and laying out all the reasons he could have charged her but did not, set a terrible precedent for this country. Prosecutors should never do that. Either charge and shut up and go to trial or don't charge. But don't fail to charge and then lay out all the reasons that you could have and maybe should have.
Well, it's interesting that you say that because in recent days, Rod Rosenstein, the Deputy Attorney General, said that he was going to stay on beyond the point that we thought he would be leaving mid-March. And what he's been saying in recent days, and even sent a letter today of this effect, saying that there should be no details on anyone who is unindicted. What is the significance of that? And maybe it goes along with what you're saying, that if you didn't indict, if you didn't charge, move on.
Well, it is manifestly unfair to name someone, say in a conspiracy indictment, as an unindicted co-conspirator. They can't prove that they didn't do it, and they're not going to be in front of a jury that can determine their lack of guilt. So prosecutors have to be very, very careful naming people in indictments that are not going to eventually stand in front of 12 of their peers and have their peers pass judgment. The other thing about the report, it would not surprise me at all if they interviewed people who said 6 or 7 different things. I mean, that's just the nature of eyewitness testimony. So in a political context, you're going to seize on whichever witness said whatever is most beneficial for you. And you're going to ignore the 5 other people who saw the stoplight was green and not red, which is why when politics and the criminal justice system collide, it is always the justice system that perishes. So I hope he does not. I hope he does not set 200-plus years of precedent in this country about not forcing people to prove their innocence on its head. You can't prove your innocence. The president can't. He's not above the law, but he's also not below the law. And the fact that he is the president does not mean he should have to prove his innocence either.
Not above and not below. Interesting way to put it. Trey Gowdy, I want to play, if we can, a video now that has just come in from moments ago. The ranking member of the House Intelligence Committee, Adam Schiff, as you know, has even said that there was evidence of collusion. Ed Henry and I were just talking about that. I want to just get his first reaction, and then we'll talk more.
I would first argue that the department cannot adopt a double standard and should cooperate willingly. But if it doesn't, we will have to subpoena the evidence. We will have to subpoena Mueller or others to come before the Congress and answer questions, because If there is evidence of a compromise, whether it arises to the level of criminal conduct or not, it needs to be exposed.
Trey, is he saying that he won't believe this report if it does not show collusion or obstruction of justice or any other kind of a crime, and this president and others will not be indicted, as what we are learning tonight, that there are no further indictments?
Harris, he's the saddest man in the United States of America. Not only did he have evidence of collusion on the president, but you may remember he also said the president may very well be indicted, and he also said he may be the first president who faces the prospect of jail.
How does he get it so wrong, then, if that's the case? We don't know what's in the report, but we know no further indictments. What's he seeing that we're not seeing?
What he's seeing is a strategy to keep this cloud, this Russia cloud, over the administration until 2020. And that's always, Adam has seen nothing that I haven't seen. So how can two people have such disparate views of the evidence? I never saw any evidence of collusion between the Trump campaign and Russia, and Adam says he has direct evidence. So, two former prosecutors who are reasonable people cannot have views that disparate unless you're looking at it through a political prism. Swalwell said that indictments were coming. Remember when he tweeted that out?
Eric Swalwell, California representative, Democrat?
Yes. Yes. He's also on the House Intelligence Committee. So these guys know what the evidence is. They're very disappointed there are no more indictments because they said that there would be. And so they're going to try to drag this out. They're going to try to bring Barr and Mueller over to even though there are no indictments, which is a high standard. You have to prove these beyond a reasonable doubt to convict somebody in this country. But in politics, you just have to throw stuff against the wall and see what sticks. So if they can get Mueller or Barr and start saying, well, this witness said that, and this witness said this, then it's a political win for them, even though it's a loss for the country.
All right, we are just getting word here. Ed Henry, thank you. Attorney General William Barr has left the building right now, and we'll report more detail on this as it happens, but we're telling you things as they're happening in real time. Trey Gowdy, it has been 1 year, 10 months, and including today, 6 days of this investigation. You were still on the Hill, and it is great to get your first response tonight when all this thing began. Thank you very much.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. Have a good evening.
Thanks.